So let's take a look at the major components of a drip irrigation system. And it's really not a whole lot different from any other irrigation system where you have remote control valves. So in this instance, I'm going to be taking a look at this particular valve here. This is what's called an inline valve. The water's coming in on this side, and you won't be able to see it on camera, but the valves will always have a little arrow pointing the direction of flow that the water's going in. So you want to be aware of that. And so this inline valve would be down in a valve box set in the ground. The other type of valve that is going to be most common is what's called an anti-siphon valve or an atmospheric breaker valve. And these are probably quite common. You've probably seen these. They sit above ground. I personally don't care for these. I don't think that they're visually very appealing, and they're also subject to issues with vandalism, freezing, bumping into them with the lawnmower, catching them with your foot and tripping and breaking something. But still, they're easy to install, they're easy to work with. But those are the two different valves we're going to be working with in any irrigation system, and since we're talking drip irrigation. So with a drip irrigation system, what makes it different from a conventional irrigation? Well, we're going to filter and reduce the pressure on our system. And to do that, we're going to be using, in this instance, this is what's called a Y filter because it's shaped like a Y. And this filter has a stainless steel screen. It's a 150 mesh screen that fits in on this and screws down. And then we also have a pressure regulator. This one is a 30 psi. They'll come in various psi settings, and all it's doing is taking the line pressure from the charged side of your system and reducing it down to 30 psi. In this instance, there's some that are 25 psi, so you can take a look at difference. I prefer the 30 psi. It gives me plenty of pressure to get some runs out into the landscape. And all drip irrigation is put together by compression. So I have a 1/2 inch drip irrigation tube, and it would simply compress into this fitting, which is an adapter into a 3/4 inch male adapter. And now it's just held in place. Once you put these in, they're tough to get out. Takes a little elbow grease to get these guys pulled back out. So back to our inline valve, this filter would simply fit into it in this configuration. And now we would set this down into a valve box. I'll show you an example of this when we get into the installation section of this course. And that's what we're going to be working with. Water coming in here, going through the filter to keep the system clean, to protect the pressure regulator, and then on out into the garden. Now, this tubing is for point source or drip irrigation. And so it's a solid piece of just plastic tubing. And by point source, it's probably what you consider the most common drip irrigation. It's where you've got a transfer barb, which would plug into this tubing, and then you would take a piece of 1/4 inch tubing or distribution tubing. It just snaps on or compresses onto that transfer barb, and you roll this piece out until you get to the plant that you want to irrigate, at which point you'll have, whoa, look at that. You will have an emitter which actually distributes the flow of water to that particular point, that point source. This is a 1/2 gallon per hour. They'll also come in 1 gallon per hour and 2 gallon per hour flow rates. So that's one system. The point source is good if you have sparse plantings, a very sparse planting or planting bed, and you don't need to do a whole lot of irrigation for it. You just want to get water to that individual plant or whatever. The other system is called line source. Line source, same idea, half-inch tubing, but now these emitters, like this one right here, this idea is built into the tubing itself. So in this instance, there is an emitter here, and then 12 inches down the line, there is another emitter. So every 12 inches, I have a half-gallon per hour emitter built into this tubing. So if I have denser plantings, then I can take this and I can lay this out. I can put it on a grid system, say 12 inches apart, 18 inches apart, and now I've got water that's being distributed from these tubings out into my landscape. And when you have dense plantings, it's a lot more convenient than taking a whole bunch of this distribution tubing, quarter-inch distribution, and running it to each individual plant. So line source and point source, we'll talk more about these both in the design phase and the installation. And finally, let's go back to our anti-siphon valve. If you're going to be using the Y filter and pressure regulator, then it would simply screw into the valve in this configuration, and now when you need to flush it, you can just screw that cap off of the Y filter, or you can even open this flush cap right here, and then you can just flush this out. So it's a pretty simple system. Everything again goes together with compression, so even like this compression end cap, the tubing would simply fit into the back end of this, and then you always want to flush your system out. And in this case, I charge the system, open it up, flush this till I see clean water coming out. Then I can put this cap back on, probably turn the water off so I don't get an unintended shower. So basic components, emitters. One thing I didn't mention is what's called the goof plug. If you make a mistake, this is just a little plug that you can take and put into wherever you have punched a hole, and you're punching the hole with a punch tool like similar to this. There's a lot of different styles on the market, but you're just punching a hole into the tubing like that, taking your transfer barb, popping it into the tubing like that. Your distribution tubing goes onto this, and then we go on out to our emitter for our point source. Line source, you don't have to do any of that. So that's kind of our terms and a lot of the materials that we're going to be working with. Now it just becomes repetitive and how to lay this out, and we'll take a look at all of that when we go into our next section on the design of our drip irrigation system. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next section.